to this informational session about the 2020 census. And I feel woohoo! So, and welcome to Curry Public Library as well. Thank you for coming. I want to point out a few people who are here today who can offer more information than I have. I want to welcome, we have Mary Jane's still not here, is she? Oh, okay, so Mary Jane's not here, but Georgia is here, Georgia Nallen, who is president of Wild Rivers Connect, and you're also associated with the League of Women Voters as well. And at the tables, we have Miriam Roberts, and who is our census recruiter for the area, and also Jeannie Waldy,
just like the spoke.
Okay, who is a Goodwill employment specialist, but she has been helping Marion. And then also we have from ORCA, so Oregon Coast Community Action, Laura Hunter, and she is our census outreach coordinator for the area. And ORCA is a census, it's a CAC, right? Which is a CRC,
Yeah.
Census Resource Center.
Is that right?
Or is it
I think it's the C.
Is it the CAC, which is the Census
Assistance.
Center? Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
We also have a plethora of information out there in several different spots. That includes pamphlets and flyers regarding why the census is important, the confidentiality regarding the census, how to respond, and again, why it matters. So, and 4 of those publications that I put back there are in Spanish as well. So if you know of any Spanish-speaking people and they would like more information, please grab a couple. And now I will introduce Jim Graham. He comes from LA, correct?
Oh, I live in Depot Bay.
Okay.
My personnel record's in LA.
Yes. Okay.
And I don't go there except when they make me.
He is the partnership specialist for the U.S. Census Bureau. So thank you so much, Jim, for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jordan. I appreciate it. I am Jim Graham, partnership specialist with the 2020 U.S. Census. I do live in Depot Bay. I am a coastal Oregonian, so I'm not one of those, coming from Hollywood or anything like that. As a partnership specialist, I cover a territory. My territory, coincidentally, is along the Oregon coast from California border through Tillamook County, and also I have Polk and Yamo counties. So it's a large territory, but if I have to smile and drive, you can't ask for a much nicer place to smile and drive than up and down the Oregon coast. And so I'm very happy to be here with you today in Gold Beach. It's really an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk to you about the 2020 census. It is coming up. Dates in the calendar are closer than they appear, and this one's very close already. So it's right around the corner that the 2020 census is going to be happening, and we'll talk about that some. But first, we have to answer the question, why do we even do a census? Well, Article 1, Section 2. The story I like to tell is, as soon as our forefathers realized that the experiment we wanted to embark upon as these United States was a democratic republic, Article 1, Section 1, they said democratic republic. Article 1, Section 2, they realized if we're going to have a democracy, we need to know how many people there are living in the United States. And so Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution says that there shall be a census within 3 years of the date of the Constitution, 1787. The first Constitution happened in 1790, and we've been doing a U.S. Census counting every person living in the United States every year on the zeros since then. So every 10 years, to this year's 2020, it's coming up. We do it because it's in the Constitution. If you remember 3 words from what I say today, I want those words to please, please, please be important, easy, and safe. The census is important, it is easy, and it is safe. And we'll talk about why each of these are, why it's important, why it's easy, why it's safe in the next few minutes. The census is important because it's the foundation of money, justice, and power in our democracy. There are so many aspects of our civilization, of our society, of our government that are driven and controlled by census data that it really is the foundation of money, justice, and power. Let's talk about power. The apportionment of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives, the Electoral College, local political boundaries and districts are all determined and drawn based on census data. So those 435 delegates are distributed among the states based on the population of the states. The population of those states is census data. Additionally, other factors, it's important for money, $675 billion a year, and that's probably the smallest number you'll hear, but it's the number I'm allowed to say. Other sources will say much larger numbers, and they're probably right. But I'm allowed to say $675 billion a year, and that's not just this year or next year. That's every year for the next 10 years. We get one chance to do our census every 10 years. We have to take this one chance and make it right. So that's the money piece of it. Justice, there are social service and social welfare programs that are funded largely based on Social Security. Medicaid is all Social Security funding. A lot of our school district funding comes based on census data. So if you go to the school board meeting and complain that class sizes are too large, the way you can really make a difference in that is to make sure that your census is complete and accurate and submitted in 2020, so those class sizes over the next 10 years, the educational system, the school district, and those teachers will receive the funding they need so that the class sizes can be brought down to size. Teachers can be paid what they're, well, teachers will never be paid what they're worth because that would take up the whole $675 billion, and that's just in Gold Beach. So, but we can come closer. We can come closer to getting our teachers paid what they're worth with a complete and accurate census. Also, social safety net programs. Section 8, SNAP, TANF, programs that help the people that are struggling to get by in our community and in our society, helps them to have the social safety net programs they need to survive and hopefully to lift themselves out of the situation they're in and achieve a better socioeconomic status and a better future for themselves and their children. Speaking of children, school lunch programs, census data, Title I grants to educational institutions. The lower socioeconomic school districts get Title I money based on census data. All manner of federal dollars come to our community based on census data. We've sent these taxes off to Washington, D.C. The way we get them back is with census data. So it's really critical that we get a complete and accurate count in our community so that Gold Beach and Curry County get as much federal money back as we can. And in Oregon, that correlates to right around $13.5 billion from that 675. If we pencil that out per person, it's about $3,200 per person. So if we miss one person, some $3,200 is not going to come into our community to be distributed among the various priorities and funding opportunities, and that's going to show. And we want to make sure it shows the other way. We want to make sure that we have complete and accurate funding so our infrastructure can be maintained and developed, so that planning can be done accurately and correctly, and to make sure that our balance of money, justice, and power is maintained. The census is easy. There are only 10 questions. But wait a minute, that's a little bit misleading. There are only 10 questions, but there are sub-questions to most of these. So it's a little bit more than just 10 questions, but depending on how you count it, we could say just 10 questions. If you have more people in the household, it's going to take a little bit longer, but if it's just you or you and a partner, spouse living alone, it's only going to be 20 to 30 minutes to complete the 2020 U.S. Census. When you think about how important that is for the next 10 years, a half an hour is an incredibly time-valuable payback on the time that you can invest to get a complete and accurate census. It's easy. There are 4 primary ways to respond to the census. Starting on March 12th, the first 2 will go live. We'll have an online self-response via the internet. This is the first time the Census Bureau has done an online self-response option. Also, at the same time, there will be an 800 number. Now, the official line on the 800 number is it's a helpline, so you can call up and get assistance doing your online census response. But the truth of the matter is, if you call up and say, I don't have a computer, I don't have access to technology, I don't know how to use technology, they can take this census response on the phone. And so there will be an 800 number publicized closer to the time, and those resources will both be available on March 12th. Now, I don't have the URL today because we don't want my cousin, the Nigerian prince, hacking into the website and messing it up in advance. We want my cousin, the Nigerian prince, to have as little time as possible to stand up frauds, scams, phishing, expeditions, and so forth. And that is something that we need to be cognizant of, and that is something that is a significant risk. We'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. So that's going to happen on March 12th. Most of you should receive in your mailbox 2 postcards. These will have 12-digit alphanumeric codes. When you go to the online self-response portal, there will be a space to enter that 12-digit code, and that will automatically populate information like your physical address and basic information that we already know about your household. We'll ask you to verify it, but it will be automatically populated. If you don't get that postcard, and if you receive your mail at a P.O. box that is not affixed to your geographical housing unit location, so if you have a P.O. box at the post office, you probably are not going to receive those postcards. So you're not going to have that 12-digit code. That's okay. You can still go online. You can still enter those data and get through to the online self-response. It's just going to be a few more keystrokes because you don't have a pre-populated address and so forth. So that's going to happen on March 12th. Toward the end of March, there will be another couple postcards that come in the mail, or don't, if you have a P.O. box. And then you'll get a paper form in your P.O. box, or you won't. When you receive the paper form, first of all, if you've responded online or on the telephone, and we recognize that we have a complete response from your address, you won't receive any more mail from the Census Bureau. So the way to stop the flow of stuff coming into your house, the way to stop somebody in the last option from coming to your door, knock, 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 can I ask you these 10 questions? The way to stop all of that is with a complete and accurate self-response as early as possible in the process. As soon as we see that we have a response, the communication from us will stop, because we want a complete and accurate census. We don't want to harass, we don't want to harangue, we don't want to stalk your home. So as soon as we see that response, we're happy, we're finished. April 1st, that paper response will come into your mailbox. And again, we ask you, we beg you to respond completely and accurately to that 2020 U.S. Census. So that's on April 1st. The official census day is April 1st. Through April, we'll send a couple more reminders asking you, inviting you to respond either online, by telephone, or using the paper form that you should have received. And then, around mid to late May, we'll start putting people on the street. We call them enumerators. These are the traditional census taker, knock, 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 can I ask you these 10 questions? They'll start going door to door to the addresses or housing units that we have not yet received a complete response from. That operation, we call it non-response follow-up. The enumerators or census takers will be in the neighborhood from late May through July 24th, trying to get everyone that's not yet responded to the census to completely and accurately respond. And they're going to have a tablet device when they come to your door. It'll be satellite linked, so your address will be very, very specifically and precisely placed on the global map of where things are. And that's critically important because when we talked about the power aspect of the census, those lines of delineation between the first and the second representative district, or Ward 1 or Ward 2 of your city council, those lines are very, very precise. And that's why we don't send the information to a P.O. box, is if we don't know the exact geographic location of your housing unit, it throws a monkey wrench into our data when we send that to Congress for them to redraw districting lines and reallocate the 435 seats and the Electoral College. So that's why we don't send to P.O. boxes, and it's why when our enumerators go to the door, they'll be satellite linked to know exactly where you are. The other advantage of that is when they collect your data, it doesn't stay on that tablet. It immediately goes into the cloud, into a very secure system. So even if that tablet is lost, misplaced, or stolen, and even if someone was able to hack into it when they did find it or steal it, your data is not going to be on that device. So that's the first time I'm talking about how it's safe. But it's easy also. Safe, here we are. I've taken an oath under Title 13 of the U.S. Code. If I divulge personal identifying information, or in the case of a business identifying information, I can go to federal prison for 5 years and be liable for a $500,000 fine. I personally don't have the time or the money to do that. And in fact, in the history of Title 13, which goes back to the 1950s, there's not once been an instance of someone divulging or inappropriately disseminating personal identifying information. The census data that does all of that good work in our community, does all of the allocation of funding, power, and justice, those are aggregate data. So even if someone works backwards from the data that the U.S. Census provides, they are not going to be able to identify an individual in a census tract or in a block unit, because we've aggregated and made the data anonymous so that you can't be personally identified and stalked or preyed upon. In addition to not disclosing information to someone that's unauthorized, let's talk about who those unauthorized people or agencies might be. Anyone outside of the U.S. Census Bureau. U.S. Census Bureau is a component of the Department of Commerce. So even within the Department of Commerce, we are not disclosing information. Homeland Security, we are not disclosing information. ICE, FBI, CIA, none of those are disclosed information. Law enforcement, state, local, and federal level will not receive information. If one of our census takers observes something in your household, some people are living with additional occupants in their housing unit. It may not be on the lease. They're in fear of that lease agreement being breached because they have cousin Vinny sleeping on the couch. Well, if you think about some agencies that are required reporters, that if they see something, they need to say something, you can almost think of the census taker as a required non-reporter. If we see something, we cannot divulge it, because we are in the community. Our objective and our mission is to get a complete and accurate census. And frankly, it has downsides. If we see an incident of abuse or neglect or something like that, we still can't report it, because Title 13 prevents us and requires that we maintain the privacy of the data of the vast majority of people that want to live a good, healthy life without intrusion and invasion. It's interesting, I was listening to the radio on the way up here, and they were talking about how Hong Kong is managing the coronavirus epidemic with quarantine in place. They're actually tracking the cell phones of their citizens to know when their citizens have strayed from their home quarantine. And that's the option. We have the option of a government looking over us with incredible acuity and incredible control, or we have the option that we have chosen as Americans. We have the option for freedom. And it makes the census a lot more difficult, but it also makes our life as Americans, a lot more free and open because we don't have a government that's tracking our cell phones and alerting or punishing us if we stray from the party line. So it's a trade-off, and it's what we've chosen as Americans to accept, that if we have the freedom, we also need to accept that every 10 years we're going to need to give up a little bit of that freedom in the form of a complete and accurate census. But at the same time, we understand what you're giving up. The Census Bureau understands and appreciates and respects your privacy, and we do safeguard that data. The challenges we face to achieve a complete and accurate census is if people are hard to identify, if they're hard to count, if they're hard to question, or if they're hard to persuade to answer the census. So let's start by talking about the first two, hard to identify and hard to reach. What kind of folks in the community would fall under that type of an umbrella? Well, if we think about people that are living without a home, homelessness, houselessness, couch surfing, those people are living under the radar. They're not terribly visible in our community. They don't want to be. They're hard to identify and hard to reach. Also, people without a voice. Very young children are a hard to count population. They don't have a voice to make themselves be heard. And so it's critically important that parents understand that every child that is in the world on April 1st has to be counted, because what happens in 5 years? That child's going to go to school. What happens if they go to school without $3,200? The school system doesn't have the funding. Class sizes get bigger and bigger and bigger. Resources are strained thinner and thinner and thinner. So it's critically important that our young children get counted. It's important that our homeless and houseless neighbors get counted too. We have a homeless issue in our communities, but our homeless neighbors are not necessarily transient. Very few homeless folks are moving from place to place and town to town. Most homeless people live in our community. They're part of our community, and they're using our resources, they're using our infrastructure, they're using our services. The way we get money for those resources, services, and infrastructure is with a complete and accurate census. So it's really important that we get everyone counted accurately and counted completely. Hard to interview. That's a language barrier. And I didn't talk about it when we were talking about the census response media, but on the online and telephone response, there are 12 languages plus English supported. I talked a little bit about the enumerators coming door to door with an iPad. Another feature that they're going to have on that tablet is basically the old-fashioned flashcard. If they encounter someone speaking a language they don't recognize, they can go through flashcards of 59 additional languages looking for a recognition of a word in some other language. And when they recognize or identify that other language, they can get help for that person to be able to answer the census. So 59 languages covers 99.6% of the languages spoken in households in America. What about that other .4? Well, I can tell you one of those .4 is a dialect of the Mayan language called Mam. It's spoken by Guatemalan refugees. I don't know if you have any Guatemalan refugees down here in Curry County. I don't know if there are any in Coos County, but I can tell you there's a population in Newport, in Lincoln County, and there are populations in Polk and Yamhill counties up towards Salem. So what do we do about the Mam people? First of all, it's a spoken dialect, not written at all, although I've learned from my Newport librarian that it actually is written. It's just most of the refugees are illiterate because they don't have a school system to go to in Guatemala, but it's a primarily spoken language. Well, the Census Bureau has provided help videos how to use the 2020 census with no soundtrack. I'm working with my Newport librarian partner, and she and I are going to work with, her husband works at Commercial Kitchen. Some of the crew in that commercial kitchen are Guatemalan refugees. They speak Mam, and they also have a bilingual capacity in English. So we're going to work with them and put a soundtrack to that boilerplate help video and bridge that gap to satisfy the Hmong dialect need that we have, at least in 3 counties in my territory alone. I'm also going to share that with my colleagues in California and other places that have Guatemalan refugee populations. The other thing about a refugee population, a migrant worker population, immigrants, they might not want to respond to the census because, frankly, they don't trust the government. And so the message for folks that we're trying to persuade to answer the census is back to that safety factor. No law enforcement agency at the state, local, or national or federal level is going to be notified of any information related to a migrant or immigrant status. The Constitution doesn't say only U.S. citizens. It doesn't say only legal residents. It says everyone living in the United States. And a rationale for that is they are in our community, they are using our services, they are using our infrastructure, they are part of our community. And so if we're going to have adequate infrastructure, services, and resources, we need a complete and accurate count of everyone living in the United States as the Constitution specifies. And on the other side of that continuum, we have people who distrust the government. They may live in the hills here in Curry County, and they may not want to see the census counter coming to their door. Again, the way to persuade the person to please answer the census is to ask how would they enjoy their life in America if there were no roads, if there were no infrastructure, if there were no services at all. And they want to get rid of some of the services, maybe many of the services, but at the bottom line end of the day, some of those things are critically important. You still need a bridge to get across the river. You still need some infrastructure to provide electricity and services like that. Yes, ma'am?
Has the citizenship question been resolved?
Thank you for that question. It has been resolved. There is no citizenship question on the 2020 U.S. Census. That was struck down by the Supreme Court on July 3rd of last year. And so the 10 questions do not include a citizenship question on the 2020 U.S. Census. So that's one of the things that, again, why do those immigrant, migrant, refugee populations have a level of distrust? It's because they perhaps don't realize that citizenship question has been struck down by the Supreme Court. So it's another way we can seek to persuade them to respond to the census. I've mentioned that I'm a partnership specialist. My role with the U.S. Census is to engage with our communities, make sure that there's a level of knowledge, a level of understanding, and to respond and address questions about the 2020 U.S. Census. Hopefully I'm engaging as I'm standing here today. Hopefully educationally I've taught you a thing or two, and I invite questions when we're done. And finally, most importantly, I'm here in our community to encourage everyone to respond to the 2020 U.S. Census. Make sure everyone in your sphere of influence, your family, friends, relatives, people you work with, people you encounter in your social life and your daily goings on, please encourage everyone to complete an accurate 2020 U.S. Census. It is vitally important to money, justice, and power in our society and in our community. So I encourage you to please, please, please answer your census. We are hiring. Miriam's in the back. If you know anyone looking for a census job, these are primarily going to be the knock, 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 can I ask you these 10 questions? Those jobs. We're hiring now. The jobs are going to start in early May at the latest, and the jobs run from late May through July 24th. And so it's a few weeks, flexible hours, at least 20 hours a week, up to full time. If you know anyone that needs a job, please pass the information along to them, 2020uscensus.gov/jobs. Good paying jobs. One of the real benefits for people who have barriers to going to work, a lot of people can't afford to go to work because they may lose some of the benefits they receive, such as SNAP or Section 8 benefits. There are waivers for these census jobs that they can take the census job, receive the pay for census work, and still receive those benefits, and most importantly, not lose their enrollment in the benefit programs during the time they're enrolled, or during the time they're employed. And I also like to point out that sometimes a person needs a job to get a job. This is a job that may help them get that next better opportunity. So if they're having a hard time finding a job, they may be a candidate that would be ideal to get some work experience, to get the U.S. Census on their resume and job history. It's a job that doesn't look bad at all, because it tells people that they passed a background check, they're basically a decent person, they're able to go out and work independently. And in this time with very low unemployment, if you can show those three things, you're likely to get a job. So you need a job to get a job. This could be it. Finally, again, my name is Jim Graham. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them now. Yes, Georgia?
You're talking about the jobs there.
Yes.
What is the timeline if someone applies for a job today? What's the process involved?
Well, the process is you go online, there's a basic profile, and then there are a couple of questionnaires. We urge you to complete the application completely. When you're selected, you'll get a call, and I have no firm fixed answer for what that timeline will be or won't be. I've heard up to months, and then you get a call, and I've heard that you get a call within days. So I don't know how that works. But once you get a call, there will be additional background information taken. There will be background checks. These jobs are primarily for U.S. citizens 18 and up with transportation. So they'll verify and validate that those criteria are met. And then it goes into a background checking fingerprint process that takes a little bit of time. And then there will be training, probably in our community. We'll probably come here to train groups of people rather than sending them to Springfield, because mileage is reimbursed, and we would rather reimburse one instructor coming here to the coast than 12 people going to Springfield to receive the training. So that's kind of how it will work. And then the period of employment, paid training, but the period of employment is going to be essentially May through July 24th. Yes, ma'am.
Are there computer jobs before the enumeration?
There are, and most of those jobs have been filled, and the traditional office jobs are in the area census offices. The area census offices are in Springfield, Salem, and Portland. So unfortunately, it's not really reasonable commuting distance to Gold Beach.
What about after?
Not that I know of. I think well, I'm a temporary employee, so sometime this summer I'll get a call, throw your stuff in a box, it's been good to know you. Most of us will get that same call at some point in time. The aggregation and manipulation and statistical reporting of that data happens with the permanent census employees that are there year-round. And those offices are, I know there's the headquarters in Maryland, there's the area census office in Los Angeles. I don't know that we have a permanent census office in Oregon at all.
And then when the enumeration starts, will the enumerators have to respond to someone locally, like you or somebody, an office here?
There will be supervisors in the field, so there will be a traditional employee direction hierarchy. As far as an office, I'm officed, I work from home. It's the supervisors and the locations are also going to be work from home employees.
All done on computers?
Yeah, well, and the supervisors are going to be out in the field a lot too. It's going to be a hands-on supervise. It's not going to be, I sit here with my feet kicked up telling you to go do the work. The supervisors are going to be working hard too.
Well, they didn't 10 years ago.
Oh,
Some of them, I witnessed, some of them were home smoking pot. They were super, they were, you know.
that was before it was legal. That can't be true.
Because they have to check every, you know, all the
Yeah.
proper stuff.
I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
Well, in our area, there's a lot of people who live sort of well, not really temporarily, but they live in like our trailer parks.
Right,
And in, you know, large campers and things like that.
right.
So those would all be primarily like door-to-door kind of census, or how do they fit into?
Those are. And so folks that are living in it's part of an operation we call group quarters, but it's not really, group quarters are senior living communities, jails and prisons, dormitories, hospitals where, rehabilitation hospitals where people live there long enough that that's where they live. Those are the kinds of places that you think about in group quarters, but at the same time, we're also looking for the people who are transient living in campgrounds, hotel rooms, sleeping on couches, and moving around. And we were particular with understanding where people live. We ask, where do you live the majority of the time? So if it's an RV lifestyle person, that perhaps they live half of their year in Minnesota and the other half on the Oregon coast or in Yuma, Arizona, snowbirds, they get to decide, where do I spend 6 months in a day? Which is my primary domicile? Where do I get counted? People who are more transient and don't have a firm fixed physical location for more than half of the year, it really comes down to where are you on April 1st. And so for the homeless people, they can respond with just the city and zip code, and we'll take it, because at the end of the day, any response is better than no response. And the homeless and houseless people are so very hard to count that we'll take as bare bones information as adequate and sufficient, and we'll work with it to the extent we can.
And so the things that are filled in prevent someone from, say, like in my household, where, you know, oh, look, I'll do my census thing online. Oh, great. And then my husband goes, oh, I'll do that census thing online. That's great. You know, but so we're not like doubly counted.
Well, you will be for
it's going to be, it's weeded out. So we're like, you know, it's like, hey, I talked to a homeless person. So did I. It's the same homeless person that they all talked to. He told me his name was Brad, it was Chuck, it was Tom. But
So there are a couple of ways we can deduplicate that. The one with you and your husband both in Goodwill responding is the easiest, because we're going to have 2 census responses from the same address with nearly identical information. And we're going to know very clearly that one of them is a duplicate and disregard one. Now, the homeless issue, where if Brad enumerates over here on one day and comes over here to the other soup kitchen and enumerates on another day, it may be more difficult because we may receive a different name each day. But if we see in a single homeless population, you know, Gold Beach is not going to have more than 100 or 2 homeless or transient or houseless people. If we see a couple of people with a kind of similar name and the same birth date, we're probably going to deduplicate one of those. And so we're going to look at it, we're going to try to recognize to the extent that we can, but there will be difficulties, we may miss some. But going back to the homeless situation, we're going to miss so many that if we duplicate 1 or 2, it's not going to skew the results. Now, the reason I came back to this slide is another joke that I like to make, is if we look at all of these factors and look at what defines a population that's easy to count. If we don't look at hard to count, what defines a population that's easy to count? And the answer to that is a white person, white family, age 50 to 65, they've owned their house, they have for several years, they receive mail at that address, and they have connectivity and technology, tech savvy. Those families are going to be overcounted, and they are every census. And so that's in Goodwill, like you were saying, if you get the online self-response and then your husband finds the paper form and does it also, that's the most traditional way that those civic-minded, community-engaged, patriot people that are out to do the best for their community, they're going to over-respond. And so we recognize that and we work around it as well. Any other questions?
As a mandated reporter, which I have been for years,
Yes.
I probably would not be an appropriate census taker with that, because it would be kind of a conflict. Like if I see, like we're saying, I'm like, oh my God, you know, you see a child that's being neglected or
Right.
abused. It's very hard, you know, actually I have a legal responsibility
Yes.
to report that. So people who are in those professions, like mental health professionals or medical professionals, or, you know, who have taken that, you know, that oath, basically.
Yes.
We could probably not be considered census takers.
I had never thought of that, and you're the first time I've heard that question, but it's a great question. I was standing here thinking, well, can you compartmentalize? But honestly, you can't, because you're 24/7 under that oath, and you're 24/7 under this oath.
That's it.
So I bet not. I bet you're right. That's interesting. I had never thought of that before. Thank you. Ma'am?
Yes, I have a question, and if you handled this before I got here, please just say it's already been handled. But this morning I read that the state of Texas decided not to support the census, and that the Senate, the Texas Senate
Yes.
decided not to support. So how is that? I mean, Oregon, this is a federal program. So
It is.
how does Texas decide not to support it?
Well, the bottom line is, and it comes back to the money, justice, and power. And the reason California has spent $160 or $70 million to support a complete and accurate census, California feels that it was remarkably undercounted in 2010, and they are at high risk of losing representation. They're at high risk of losing power. So they're investing a lot of money to try to validate as many people as they possibly can to maintain as much of their power and representation as they can. Texas has taken another perspective on that, and they have decided and deemed that it's a federal program, it's not their requirement, and it's not a requirement that a state support, but about 28 or 29 states have decided to support census efforts. Here in Oregon, the governor is the chair of she's not the chair, she stood up a complete count committee to help to drive a complete and accurate census. Through that complete count committee, $7.5 million were allocated to Oregon. The United Way of the Willamette, and Laura will probably talk more about this, but the United Way kicked in another $2.5 million to make $10 million. What they're doing with that is standing up a census assistance center in at least every county to help to achieve a complete and accurate census. And that's what Laura is. She's a recipient of some of that benefit. She's bringing that benefit and some of that money back into Curry County, putting it back into your economy so it can circulate and make more money. And Texas has chosen not to.
But they, okay, so they don't give extra money, but they can't
Right.
keep the federal government
No,
from doing a census.
We're doing everything we can, but it's going to be much more difficult. It's going to be much more suspect because we can only do so much with the funding levels and staffing levels that we have provided. And just because the states are kicking in 150 or $10 million doesn't mean that the federal staffing levels are different. It's pretty much the same staffing levels regardless. And so they're going to be at a severe disadvantage.
Why would a state decide not to support the census? You would think that that would be a no-brainer.
I really can't speak to the specific political issues that are making them have that decision.
Peculiar.
Yes, sir.
Is there any advantage as far as being hired if you're lived here all your life and you have local knowledge that would certainly give you a good advantage of being more successful in this census taking?
I sure hope so, but I can't say yes. We would love to have people with local knowledge, with local involvement, especially in some of those hard to persuade populations. That would be so incredibly valuable to the U.S. Census and to the community for the next 10 years that I would absolutely strongly urge you, if you're interested in leveraging those social networks, please do apply. But as far as getting some preference, if you're a veteran, you get a few points. But we don't have a way to quantify and specify local knowledge. But that's why we're hiring people in the communities to do the work in the communities, is we hope we do get that local knowledge. Yes, ma'am?
Do veterans get a preference for?
They do, yes.
And the other, is there a certain test that you have to pass to qualify, like math or?
I got hired through a different avenue for my position. My understanding is the questions are primarily behavioral, not necessarily based on logic. They're designed to find people who are trustworthy and dependable and are going to do the job, not necessarily that you can solve the Pythagorean theorem and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Marion?
Jim, I just wanted to say, I'm here today. If there is anyone that wants to apply online, I'll be glad to go in the other room at a public computer and help them.
Thank you very much. And that's absolutely, if you're interested in applying today, talk to Marion. She is my recruiting colleague. She's here in the community. She's in Brookings and Curry County to help people with their application process. And the recruiting process is going to come to an end at pretty much the end of February. So let's do it today. If there's anyone here, please talk to Miriam. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank all of you for the opportunity here today. I really, really appreciate it.
I'm just going to have a few words to piggyback a little bit to what Jim's been saying. He gave some wonderful information. So glad. One question, how can we here, with all the information you've given us, what's the best thing other than over-counting ourselves?
Please don't do that. So there are going to be several resources available in our communities. The primary among those is our libraries have public computers, and most of our libraries are going to have people that have had some level of knowledge given to them, trained for them to be able to help people respond to the census. Also, Laura Hunter is standing up census assistance centers in the county. Those are going to be staffed with computers available and able to help people to respond to the census. And there are also, if you're interested in volunteering and helping with the census, Georgia and the League of Women Voters are very generously volunteering in some of the libraries to help the library staff get a complete and accurate census. So that is remarkably powerful and valuable and so greatly appreciated.
I just have one quick question too. So the census takers have to be 18 or older?
Yes.
So it's not something we could involve students in?
It's not. And It's because they need to be of the age of majority to take the oath.
Right, okay.
So that's the rationale.
Yeah. It would be nice civic kind of.
Yeah. If we could have the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, FFA, and 4-H all out there, because everybody's going to buy the Girl Scout cookies. They do the census too.
I got one. Yeah, and actually, I'm just going to piggyback a little bit and have, I think Jeannie, who's helping out Marion, come and say a few words about what the recruitment is. Jeannie, and maybe about what Goodwill also does. Is that something you want to do? And then I'm going to have Laura Hunter talk about the hard-to-count population. What's unique here in Oregon, and I know other states are doing this, is that the major funders, a philanthropic collaboration of major funders, including OCF, Oregon Community Foundation, Ford, and Meyer Memorial, have gotten together to help fund a campaign called We Count Oregon to count the hard-to-count population. And each county will have what they call a Census Assistance Center. And here in Curry County, ORCA, Oregon Coast Community Action, had received the award for that program, and Laura's going to talk about that as well. So Jeannie, why don't you come up here and give a few minutes of information on Goodwill and what you're doing to help Marion.
Okay. Well, I'm Jeannie Malonza, and I am the job specialist, employment specialist for Goodwill Job Connections. And Goodwill, as most of you know, they're different districts, and we are Lane County, South Coast, and Alaska. And what I do is I help people find work, and that's why I've been working with Marianne on the census and helping her do a little recruiting, since I have a lot of people I get to pick from. But I also have 2 computers that are for public use in my office in the store. My office is in the back of the Goodwill store in Brookings. And those 2 computers are for anyone who needs to use them to the job search and that type of thing. And we also have said that they can come in and do whatever they need to do for the census. And I've recruited about 12 people that have come in and put in apps for the census. So this meeting today was really great because I think Jim covered how helping us understand what's going to happen. And now I'm going to try to get my group together and try to explain what he did here for us today. But anyway, Goodwill, we don't just, you think of Goodwill as your place to donate or people with disabilities working there, but we are more than that. We are huge, and we do lots of things in the community as where I can help people with STEP. I work on the program, I support the program in Goodwill for TANF. I have some young ladies that right now that I'm hoping to get to do the census now that I know that they can do it without worrying about losing their benefits. And so we help people who have barriers to employment, people who have been in prison, people who may be handicapped in some way, and I work with the other organizations in the community, and I do a lot of referrals out to the people. So anyway, I am in the store, and I'd be happy if any of you would like to stop in and talk. I would love that. So thank you all to coming today. We really appreciate it.
I'm going to have Laura Hunter come up here and talk about the rollout of the program that you're doing for helping the hard-to-count population be counted.
Hi, I'm Laura Hunter. I am the director of Oregon. That's not true. I'm the director of the South Coast Food Share, which is from Oregon Coast Community Action. I'm also the Coos Curry Census Assistance Center coordinator for the 2 counties. We did apply and receive the grant in early mid-January, so it's kind of a rush to get the program up and running. What we're doing is looking to find everyone interested and already working with the census and wanting to have a really robust and successful count this year, and kind of working to collaborate together to do the best outreach to those hard-to-reach populations. So specifically what I'm looking at is I'm looking at those sites where hard to reach populations are going to get resources already. So food banks, meal sites, any of those kind of supplemental programs, our offices for local support services, Oregon Coast Community Action offices. It was brought up to me today that, the low-income individuals, people on Oregon Health Plan, another good place to look at. So I am housed in Coos Bay. I'm not going to pretend to fully be knowledgeable on Curry County and really want to draw on everybody's knowledge to make our support the best. What we're doing is we've created a part-time position here in Curry County and a part-time position in Coos County. Both will be doing similar things, which is basically they will be going out to different sites that are pre-set up for certain hours, namely our meal sites and our food pantries, with a computer, with information, and with the most support that they can give without actually taking the census for someone. And so looking at making sure that we're not sending someone to some place where you guys are, maybe having people go, and so we're not all duplicating services and finding ourselves double counting folks. So that's the gist of the idea. We are working throughout the two counties all together, not just here in Gold Beach. And so any support's really important. We have a job, we posted it just a few days ago for Curry County, and it's $17 to $19 an hour. We are providing a vehicle, we are providing equipment, all of those things, the training, etc. And so the posting closes on March 1st. You can go to Oregon Coast Community Action's website, www.orcca.us/careers, and you can go there and apply or send folks to apply. I also have paper copies in the back with my card, and just some general resource guides for the community. That's really what I'm looking at. What I'm doing right now in Coos is I'm working with the Coos portion of the library system there. They've got some folks that are going to go out and do some actual pop-up site locations as well. I always say this, NeighborWorks Umpqua also got the same grant that we did, so they're doing their own version of an assistance center. And so I kind of just want to do something similar here. We're just looking to integrate, so we're just coordinating services instead of duplicating them. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yes.
I know that NeighborWorks Umpqua is only doing Coos County, and they're using their tax centers for that.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, in Curry County, are you going to be reaching out, not just the food banks, the resource centers, the market agencies, but maybe the senior centers as well in our community?
Yeah, so we are going to do our best. We only have one part-time person doing it though, for the period of time. So yes, I'm going to be working to set up hours that they can go to all of those locations when and if possible, to make sure that we are reaching all of those. But it's really just, we only have funding enough for a part-time person. We're looking at about 29 hours a week, where they'll be going during open hours, during, of all of our pantries and any of the other services. So if there's other folks that are planning to do any of the similar things in town, or want to, support with volunteers in something like this, that would also be fantastic. Because while it will be a really big help, this is a very widespread out community, and so traveling all across the county is going to be interesting. That's a good word. Thank you.
Have you talked to Beth at the Homeless Coalition yet?
I have worked with Beth back when she was at Oregon Coast Community Action. She has been in the loop, but because the grant really just was granted to us, my first point was just getting the job description out. So I'm going to be hitting it hard this next couple weeks.
I spend 2.5 hours a week there, Wednesday afternoons, helping to be there so that men can come in and take advantage of the showers because there's no men. But she has at least 5 women who are unhoused, who come in and volunteer there, who, based upon my observations, would be fully capable of doing that job. The question is background checks. Is this going to be the typical federal background check that eliminates anyone that has a criminal record that shows up on a background check?
So this is through Oregon Coast Community Action. There are some background checks that will take place. This is not a federal funded job, so it's not going through the same things as that, but you know, we are going to take into consideration, and like we can't unfortunately not do a background check. It's part of the Oregon Coast Community Action policy, and then each one is just subject to review as we go. It doesn't mean that you aren't applicable, it just means that it's going to be a case-by-case basis on what a potential issue or cause of a background could be, and whether that fits the job needs.
Can I address background checks for the census jobs very briefly? There is a background check, and it does have constraints and exclusions, but there are certain felonies that are going to pass that background check. Because what we're screening for are things that are going to alert us to the risk of someone coming to your door. We're trying our best to not send someone to your door that you wouldn't be comfortable coming to your door. So if there's a violent felony or something as egregious as housebreaking, those people are not going to pass the background check. If it's a simple financial problem that they kited a check 21 years ago, that's quite possibly going to be acceptable through the background checking process. Just because they had a mistake when they were 18 years old doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad 39-year-old. So those things are looked at on a case-by-case basis, and I know of someone who is working through a pass with a DUI. They're asking for the court records and the background about how that incident happened, and looking for evidence that he's rehabilitated, honestly. So there are background check requirements, but it doesn't necessarily preclude everyone with a record. It depends on what that record shows and what the individual shows today. Similarly, as Laura was talking about, how do they interview today is really important.
Excuse me. How many positions are you looking to fill, and have you already started filling?
Marion.
As of yesterday morning, we needed 36 more enumerators in Curry County.
Wow.
36 more?
Yes.
And how many have you
Applications
hired
or
already?
positions filled?
No positions to be filled.
Okay.
Well, let's go applications.
Okay.
Is a better answer.
Wow, I had no idea it was that many. I know it's 8,600 statewide, but I don't know the numbers on the granular basis like Marion does.
Mayor, sorry, but did you say 36 more? But how many, I missed what you said before that. Are people coming down from Coos County to work, Corey?
No,
No.
no. This would just be applicants in Curry County that we're looking for.
So a total of 36 workers.
Right, more. That doesn't mean to say they wouldn't accept more. More merrier action.
And I do want to clarify that these are two different sets of jobs. The enumerator job is very much the door-to-door job. This job that Orca is hiring for, there's only one position, and it is not a door-to-door job. It is setting up at our service provider locations that are already in existence. So,
I worked for quite a number of years with people with chronic mental illness, which I think is a very difficult population to find sometimes. Do you get cooperation with, say, mental health agencies or that kind of thing? Like where you could set up someone at like our local Curry Community Health or something like that to capture that population that might not be housed well? You know what I mean?
Well, in terms of can I make that connection? Yes, I can make that connection. I'm just going to be very transparent. The grant process came to us in a very fast and quick manner. Then we had to wait to learn about it, and we were neck deep in the point in time count. And so as soon as that was over, I jumped right into working on census stuff. And I'm pretty much the person doing most of that work in terms of coordinating for Oregon Coast Community Action. So I have a card back there, and if you have contacts that you feel, because you're in this community, would be somewhere really important for us to kind of reach out and see if they'd be willing to house our Curry person to come and spend some time to do that outreach, I would gladly accept that so that I can start working on that. Again, I'm not a resident of this community, and so any help from community members that I can get to make this person's position the best and most successful for this community is really appreciated.
The reason I came back up is you're getting very close to describing the population that we are seeking to count, the census is seeking to count, in a special operation that will go April 1st, March 30, 31. So March 30, 31, April 1st, we're going to be doing what we call service-based enumeration, and people who receive services, homeless people especially, we're going to be especially looking to count them at the place where they receive services. So whether that's a soup kitchen or a warming shelter or an actual homeless shelter, we're seeking to find those locations and enumerate them where they receive services. Whether that the specific mental health provider, health services provider you're talking about is on our radar, I don't know. And so I ask you to talk to me afterwards and make sure and I'll coordinate with Laura to make sure that we're not duplicating and wasting resources and effort in that way. But we're seeking to make that work happen.
And I love this. This is exactly why you guys are in the room together.
Yes.
Because it's a coordination effort. I mean, if after the 30th, 31st, we don't count everyone, then the hard-to-count population, which again is a different funding stream. It is through the organizations in Oregon that's collaborated to make sure we have that hard-to-count population taken care of. So,
Just, do you have the information from the point in time, and will someone go out into the woods who's able to take census information, or do the people have to come out of the woods to a service location to get counted?
So in terms of our position with Oregon Coast Community Action and the We Count Oregon campaign, we will not be sending individuals out into homeless camps to count. We are setting up only within mostly our food pantries and our meal sites, and then any other little locations, service provider locations that aren't being touched between those two situations. But I can't say anything for.
We will.
Okay.
It's part of that service-based enumeration, the 3 days, March 30, 31, April 1. And the specific operation under that service-based enumeration is temporary non-sheltered outdoor living, or TNSOL. So yes, we are going to be going out into the woods and trying to engage people and get them to respond to the census. And it's a remarkably difficult and sensitive operation because we are going literally into someone's home when we go into an encampment in the woods. And so these are going to be very specially trained enumerators that are going into the woods to encounter and engage the homeless people who are living in encampments.
Will they earn more money?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know.
Segue into what issues people find when they go in, not only homeless camps, but people who feel very strongly about not being counted. And have you had any enumerators who have been shot at, who have been killed? Are there statistics? I mean, it's kind of a scary thing when you think about it.
Yes.
Yes.
And I apologize for making a joke of it. We take the safety and security of our enumerators very, very seriously. And to the extent possible, we manage and mitigate those risks. At one extreme example, let's talk about South Central LA in 2010. They would roll up, a marked police cruiser would park at the end of a block, and a buddy team of 3 enumerators would go up one side of the block and back, up the other side of the block and back. And then the police cruiser and the team of enumerators would move to the next block. So the law enforcement presence is visible and evident, but we don't want it to be a draconian, authoritarian type of an operation. We want there to be deterrence, but not a jackbooted thug type of operation. And so, to the extent possible, do things happen? Things happen every day. And things happen to enumerators as well. But to the best of our ability, not every day.
I just want to follow up with, Oregon Coast Community Action has been doing the point in time count every year for many, many years. I've only been participating in it for the last, I think, 3.5 or 4 years. It's only required every other year for funding, but Oregon Coast Community Action does it every year to make sure that we're keeping those relationships going. Yes, there's always going to be the folks that are transitioning, that are new, that weren't here last year, but that transparency of why it's important and how it actually brings money to support the services that support those individuals is really important, and they're more likely to work with us than not. I know that there was an example given at the Coos Library training that was just like this, and I think your example was when you go to the house and the person has the gun because they don't want to count, and they have a house. It was more, to me, that seems more likely that you're going to roll up on someone in the hills that doesn't want to be counted but has a home and has all of those things than those individuals living in the camps. Now, I'm not on either one of those fences, so I can't speak from their points of view, but given that we really have successful point-in-time counts, I feel like our two communities, Coos Curry, are going to be pretty successful in that.
And to that point, if our enumerators do not feel comfortable, they are instructed to back away. And when we go to a housing unit and knock on the door, we'll do that 3 times. And if we can't get a response or get rebuffed or sent away 3 times, we may go to the neighbor and get the best information we can, which is probably going to be a head count plus or minus 1 or 3. And again, it goes back to what I was saying, that any response is better than no response. If we can get a neighbor to say, yes, there's a family, I think there's mom and dad, a mother-in-law, and a couple of kids, that's good enough. If it's putting our enumerators at risk, that's good enough, because we've got some count with some level of authenticity, and we'll work with that.
I just want to say, as part of search and rescue, I did one of the evacuation sweeps to Georgia's neighborhood during one of the fires. And it was pretty easy to identify a house you didn't want to go and knock on the door. It was pretty easy.
It wasn't mine.
And there are others where you should shout out before you kick down the driveway. And I had a sheriff's orange jacket, but you're just careful.
I think too, being in a small community, like you were saying, people who have been here for a long time and are familiar with people, you know where people are, you know who our homeless are, you know where they might be. And I think that's the beauty of maybe taking a census in a small community like ours, is that we kind of know where they are and how to approach certain people, or you could get a friend to go, can you talk to Bob out there in the woods and just see if he could come down to fill out a form or something? You know, I think we can work things out a lot differently than in, let's say, LA.
Any other questions for me?
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. We're going to close this up a little early. I do want to bring Mary Jane LaBelle, who is the president of the League of Women Voters, up here to close out. And also thank you, Carl King with Curry Voices, for taping this and getting a broader audience.
And thank you, Georgia, for pulling this all together. Thank you, with the library. Well, this is the 100th anniversary this year of the League of Women Voters, and we've been very busy. Census is a main target, as well as a redistricting possible ballot measure. We are, of course, nonpartisan as far as candidates go, but we hold strong advocacy for issues, and census is one of those. In October, up in Portland, I was told by the League of Women Voters Oregon that we were going to assist the libraries, and we're trying to stay out of everybody else's way so we don't overlap or redo. But what we plan to do with the library's help is set up tables in the library where our people will be trained, and we will be sitting maybe one day a week, and we'll get out press releases about this, when people can come and get assistance and get information about the census. So we're using the library places and working with the library. They'll tell us what to do, but you will see us there, and we'll help. You can send people to us, but it'll be in the newspapers. We haven't worked out dates and times. There's information about other forums that are going on. We're having candidate forums, redistricting forums, and probably no more on the census right now. But we want to thank you for your participation today in this, and thank you all for coming. If you need us, please go on League of Women Voters Corey County website. My contact information is there, Mary Jane LaBelle, and we will attempt to help you. Our membership is in all 3 cities, so we will attempt to help with some volunteers. So, thanks again. And please
Before we leave, I just wanted to announce that the library, Curry Public Library, is hosting our census kickoff event on March 19th. Now, March 19th is a third Thursday, which is our typical trivia night. Now, rather than having a $5 buy-in, which we usually do for our trivia night, we are not getting buy-ins at all, but we will have prizes for the winning teams. Teams 4 or more, and these questions are going to be census related. I'm not too sure exactly what that means yet, but I'm sure a lot to do with U.S. government as well. And so please come 5:30, March 19th, the third Thursday of the month, for a fun trivia night. And we'll also provide food, beverages. So please come and tell